So I've literally just got off a stream doing this thing, this. I've literally just got off stream this very morning, just covering this very same topic, and I'm still a bit tongue-tied, as you can tell. But the worry, of course, is that we are seeing other far-right movements trying to copy these very same movements. So we could see a very similar movement spread over here. And of course, in Canada, they are portrayed as being very pro-worker. But as we've discussed before in that stream, and as we'll get into here, they are anything but pro-worker. And that's the worrying thing, that these things are being run and organized by some very far-right groups and some very obvious, as we'll also get into, libertarian billionaires who, quite frankly, want nothing more than to essentially send people back into work. And, well, if they get sick, they get sick. They don't mind so long as their money just keeps rolling in. And of course, if these do spread, then again, we on the left have to be very careful and warn people that these are not left-wing protests. They are very much a right-winger, far-right, shall we say, libertarian protest ideas that we do not agree with, because they are very worrying. And again, in Canada, hopefully it doesn't turn to violence, but again, considering that they arrested very recently and found a big cache of weapons in there, that was indeed very worrying, and a good thing that they, shall we say, got arrested and confiscated before anything could be, shall we say, done with them. So in that case, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And also down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do watch and help and support and donate the channel. So on with this then. This comes from the Yorkshire Bylines with the title of Beware the Freedom Convoys and Anti-Social Media. This week's Convoie de Liberté in France was directly inspired by, of course, the ongoing Freedom Convoy in Canada. It was aimed to descend on Paris before making its way to Brussels for Valentine's Day, with up to over 7,500 police officers being deployed in Paris, issuing approximately 113 fines and making at least 97 arrests. And although the arrival did arrive in Brussels was not dramatic, its events organizers had hoped for, they had managed to at least cause some chaos. Looking at, of course, very similar protests in France and elsewhere, a very worrying pattern is emerging. Back in November of 2018, France was rocked by the protest organized by the Gilets Jaunes, which was the Yellow Vest protests, which started out as a small protest against the rising fuel prices and grew into something much large-scale movement and became the longest-running protest since the Second World War. The group encompassed climate change deniers, extremists from both the left and the right, anti-government conspiracy theorists, and a handful of desperately and lonely people who were happy to find kindred spirits on the nation's seemingly inexhaustible supply of roundabouts. There were also a bunch of rightly fed up people in search of an outlet to try and vent their frustrations. Whilst being for the mostly part harmless, they were largely derided by the majority of the population who found their protest irritating. And although the Yellow Vests still exist, they have dramatically diminished in number, but not before achieving some concessions from the government, notably concerning the easing of the proposed new rules for the control techniques of the MOTs and the monetarium on fuel tax rises. More recently, of course, the Freedom Convoy, which has been paralyzing Ottawa, in many ways was the same type of movement. Initially started as a protest against vaccine requirements for truckers crossing the US-Canadian border, the group now encompasses climate change deniers, QAnon supporters, and an anti-Trudeau contingent, and a bunch of Confederate flag wavers. And of course, according to the Washington Post, the Freedom Convoy was indeed the brainchild of the far-right conspiracy theorist James Boulder, who 2 years ago was involved in the controversial United We Roll protest in Canada in support of pipelines and in opposition to carbon taxes, who attempted to smash picket lines outside the Unry oil refinery. And of course, for the local group, the aggrieved haulage operators, the Freedom Convoy has managed to raise a staggering sums of money. Their GoFundMe account has attracted donations totaling at least $10 million in just 3 weeks, until it was frozen for breaching the platform's rules on non-violence. One of the contributors, the American billionaire Thomas Malcel Gomes, has donated a staggering $90,000. The group then went on to raise money via the Christian fundraising platform Give, Send, Go, which in the space of a single week accrued at least 8.6 million before being shut down by Ottawa's Superior Court and the money refunded. The protest is still ongoing, but now receiving cryptocurrency donations and in fact cheered on by Donald Trump and even Elon Musk. So, what are they actually protesting for? As with the earlier Yellow Vest movement and, of course, the current Canadian protest, the current protesters in France have an eclectic range of profiles. The Convoie de Liberté attracted a very anti-health passeurs and the anti-vaxxers people, who are indeed anti-government and supporters of the far right and left, as well as those protesting the current spike in fuel costs, and they're uniformly fed up with what they perceive to be an over-controlling state. And although there is no suggestion that the French Convoie de Liberté has received funding of any sort, it was inspired by themselves and of the perceived loss of liberty, freedom, and cheap fuel that has been at the heart of the causes of the French Yellow Vest movement and, of course, the recent freedom convoys. The issues of fuel and government controls mirror almost the exact same concerns of the libertarian right in the United States. Many, such as Charles Koch, have heavily invested in the fossil fuels industry and therefore have an interest in discrediting carbon emission targets and the green agenda. And of course, these protest movements in the West have been changing in recent years thanks to social media. They can harness even more attention and become less specific. And although intently on centering on a single issue, the EU, fuel prices, vaccines, and liberal elites are really encompass a broad church of grievances, often with a hint of nostalgia for a bygone era. They talk about reclaiming something as if it has been lost along the way, with a grandiose and wide-sweeping slogans such as taking back our freedoms, making America great again, take back control. Inevitably, the internet now plays a large role in communication, and these protest groups do inspire each other's ideas, tactics, and even symbols. For example, the Yellow Vest, although it became infiltrated, was by no means a far-right movement. Translates as Yellow Vests, name taken off by a group of far-right protesters inspired by the original French movement in 2019. The aforementioned James Boulder of the Canadian Freedom Convoy has links with this movement. The Yellow Vests also became the uniform of a bunch of pro-Brexit agitators in the UK around the very same time. The original demands of these protests, although they were never more than a fringe movement, have been driven by genuine grievances such as disenfranchisement, financial pressures, lack of social mobility, and something of a very nebulous and wide-ranging nature of these concerns make them very easy prey for manipulation by interest groups serving the very financial and political interests of a completely different section of society. Since, of course, the early 2010s, 55 Tufton Street in London has been the home of several right-wing think tanks. And of course, the members of these groups offer themselves prominently in or even have close ties to the government, with several in the cabinet itself. The following locations from the organisations have operated and currently do so are the Taxpayers Alliance, Brexit Central, the Centre for Policy Studies, Civitas, the Global Warming Policy Foundation, Leave Means Leave, the New Culture Forum, Migration Watch, Big Brother Watch, and Net Zero Watch. The titles of these groups do provide information as to the areas they hope to even influence policy. The names often sound benign and even non-partisan, but they are anything but. Despite the fact that these organizations disclose the sources of their fund, there have been leaks, and even most famously by supporters Selma Sani, have revealed that most of the funding from these are from the American Libertarian right. And of course, Matthew Elliott, the founder and chief executive of the Taxpayers Alliance, was even a former partner at the Awareness Analytic Partners, the A2P, the data analysis technology company with ties to Davos, Trump, and the Koch families. His wife Sarah was indeed a fundraiser for Americans for Prosperity, a right-wing libertarian campaign group funded by the Koch brothers. She now chairs the Republicans overseas in London. These, of course, think tanks are even linked and often funded by the mega-rich donors and players in the American libertarian right. The very same people have been promoting the Canadian Freedom Convoy, in which turn inspired the French Convoie de Liberté, plus other convoys in Australia, the Netherlands, and even New Zealand. And in this article, at least 6 billionaires are referenced who are encouraging these grassroots protests across the globe by ordinary people. So call me a cynic, but because I don't think they care. And that is very, very true. You do have to be incredibly careful. And as we've just seen from my stream today, people like Russell Brand and other people on the left have fallen for these the lie that they are pro-worker. But again, you've got to look at the American Truckers Union, who has been, not the American, the Canadian Truckers Union, who has been very much against these protests, saying they aren't pro-worker. If they were, they'd be talking about getting rid of zero-hour contracts, making sure that they've got fair pay and better working conditions. And these protesters haven't talked a single thing about those things. So be incredibly suspicious, first of all, of these protests and the fact that sometimes these nebulous big movements can very much be co-opted by these very right-wing libertarian think tanks to discredit movements like the move to a net zero, because we know we need to get there. But the problem is these right-wing group, like especially libertarians, do not want to go there because they have big funding in these big oil companies, which again make them millions of pounds, and they do not want to lose that billions of pounds that they get. But then, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.